We have had so much fun on season 3 of The Communicative Leader. We've chatted with so many insightful, thoughtful, visionary leaders, all experts in their own fields. When I was looking at season 3 as a whole and considering what we learned, it really struck me that this season centered around lifelong learning. In considering the 10 episodes from this season, I pulled out 10 major leadership takeaways and themes. Then we're going to end by looking at lessons that were repeated by several guests. Why? What does this tell us? It tells us that this advice is effective. This advice is worth considering. And this advice is what helps these really, really incredible professionals thrive in their respective industries. Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to The Communicative Leader, hosted by me, Dr. Leah O'Million-Hodges. My friends call me Dr. O. I'm a professor of communication and a leadership communication expert. On The Communicative Leader, we're working to make your work life what you want it to be. Thank you for joining us on the Season 3 finale of The Communicative Leader. Before we dive into these 10 amazing leadership takeaways, I just want to give you a heartfelt thanks for listening, for your support, for being part of a group of people who are working to make their work lives what they want it to be. Our first leadership takeaway is embrace both change and a growth mindset. So what does this mean? Leaders should have a mindset that believes in potential for growth and development for themselves and their team members. When you embrace this growth mindset, it allows you to approach challenges as opportunities rather than hurdles that we can't possibly overcome, and these opportunities for learning to continuously improve. When I thought of this theme, I thought of Season 3, Episode 8 with Ulrike Seminati. Ulrike is an internationally renowned leadership communication coach. She didn't begin as a coach and consultant. Instead, she worked in industry for years, beginning as an administrative assistant and working her way up to the C-suite before leaving to start her own business. Ulrike talked about the I or being dimension and the we or doing dimension. Of course, we need to be in the we/doing dimensions at work often, right? We need to get projects done. We need to develop strong relationships. But in order to continue to grow, we also need to lean into the I or being dimension. She talks to us about it here.
It comes back to what I said earlier on, is these two dimensions, the I and the we, the being, the doing. So focus really on yourself first. Take time for that whenever, but it's so important. I wish that I was more aware when I was a leader. And I wasn't. I was more or less stumbling successfully through my career, more or less driven because I wanted to learn and because I wanted to have an interesting profile. And so, yes, I tried a lot of new things and that was great. But I could have done that really differently because very often I felt awkward, imposter syndrome in place, not confident enough. But on the outside, everybody thought I was. But I was certainly not authentic. And I was losing a lot of power, a lot of energy in that, a lot of worry and anxiety behind the scenes in myself. And I think many people have that. And the first thing is really to understand, who am I? How do I relate to my job, to what I have to do? And admitting also the things that don't work well, where you're not perfect, to yourself. I mean, really admit things to yourself. Many people shy away from that. When I speak to leaders, they have this kind of fear, as if they couldn't function anymore, operate anymore, as soon as they see something which they don't like in themselves. And I think it's really important to get away from that. You can only win if you look into yourself, really. And you can only develop, like with any project, you can only develop something where you are aware what are the development areas. And so help yourself really to get out of this anxiety mode and out of this mode of, I just somehow do things and I don't really feel being myself oftentimes, by understanding who you are. I think that's the biggest task, because when you have done that, then comes the second step. And that is really about looking at others and creating just much more awareness about their reactions and learning to be emotionally intelligent and more empathetic, learning to understand what triggers them Some are similar to me, for sure, but some are totally different. They have, why the heck are they interested in that? Or why are they not reacting to this wonderful thing that I just said?
Yeah.
And seeing this as something where you can then grow and really work with that much more deliberately and address it as well with people, the differences, and value the differences. There's no good or bad profile. So I think it's really about understanding what we always call diversity, and we love to have that. That's it. Understanding, first of all, who you are, who are the others, and how can we value all of that, how we can bring these very different strengths together to create synergies instead of trying to push everybody into the same leader shape of being a perfect growth mindset that loves agility. Because that's really an illusion. Some people cannot be that, even if they wanted to, but they can't.
Clip, Ulrike points out how we're all unique and we have our own paths. But through some reflection and intention, we can really start to better understand where we are. And once we know where we are, my friends, it's a lot easier to identify where we want to be. When we think about this process of change and growth, we have to think about feedback and potential setbacks that may come with it. And this leads us to our second major takeaway of the season. Seek feedback and learn from failures. We know leaders should actively seek feedback from team members, peers, mentors. My friends, even if you're not in a titled position, you should still be doing this. Not always comfortable. So why would I want to do this, you ask? Well, that constructive feedback, it helps us to identify areas for improvement and where we can grow personally. Also, when leaders view failures as valuable learning experiences, it gives us some more data, another point to understand what went wrong, where went wrong, and how we can be more successful in the future. I am not sure that anyone does this better than Steve Marcinuk, co-founder and general manager of Intelligent Relations. Steve is among the humblest of leaders you'll ever meet and among the most talented of leaders you'll ever meet. And for the record, this is not a coincidence, but rather an outcome. Steve does the work. He's constantly learning and ensures he's always prepared. He will tell you he's not the smartest in the room. I'm not really sure if I believe him, but by being the most prepared, he's able to ask thoughtful questions and provide insightful feedback and advice. He is an advocate for constant learning, asking questions of your team, and listening. What else? He is also an advocate of embracing failure. Here's an excerpt from his episode where he talks to us about failure.
Yeah. If I may, two thoughts on that. One is that it's the fear of failure is deeply instilled in a lot of people. And so I'm still navigating the best way to communicate that to the team. I think that candid communication is a very positive thing in most organizations, but some people, that could be a triggering word. If I were to say, hey, our first attempt at this failed, that doesn't hit me in a personal way. That doesn't trigger anything in me, but to someone who's looking to us to lead and to provide a certain sense of stability, does that trigger, I did a bad job? Does that trigger the company is going to end up downsizing because of failure could mean a lot of things. And so it's something that I'm still learning the right way to communicate that. I don't know if you have specific thoughts on it, but it's perhaps delicate.
Steve, in Season 3, Episode 1, he also talks to us about an exercise he uses from Black Box Thinking, where he and his team think about failures before they happen. What does this mean? It means setting aside time to think deeply about what failure could look like in a week, a month, 6 months down the road. This helps us to raise potential concerns that a team might not have considered otherwise. What else? It normalizes the idea of failure or possibly falling short and addressing it collectively and with open arms. What does that do? It removes the shame that many associate with shortcomings or mistakes, and instead acknowledges the collective strength in an organization that acknowledges failure, addresses concerns quickly and fully, and moves on better because of it. Failing forward, meaning we take a breath, we review what happened, we reflect on it. Is this really a failure or did I just fall short? Maybe I need to set different goals. This process is one that rests on self-awareness. Dan Joseph, former Army combat engineer and author of a recent book on leadership and resilience, helps to exemplify our third takeaway, cultivating self-awareness. Self-awareness is essential for leadership and lifelong learning. Leaders who understand their strengths, their weaknesses, their personal biases, you can leverage this awareness to make better decisions, to build stronger relationships, and continuously develop as a leader. One way to cultivate self-awareness is through reflection. Oftentimes, in order to have the ability, the space to reflect deeply and honestly, we need to take time to engage in self-care so we have a clear mind, a quieter mind that is open to honest reflection. Dan talks to us about perceptions of self-care and how these are changing and changing for the better.
Yeah. And one thing I would say, especially if there's anyone in the military listening to this who's like, oh, well, self-care, I don't know, kind of soft, it's kind of weak, or whatever it is. What's the irony of this? Especially people in the military, men and women in the military would never say, oh, you maintaining your vehicle is weak. Maintaining your weapons is weak. Doing maintenance on something to keep it from breaking down, that's not weakness. You are investing in something to keep it going. Why aren't we doing that with our brains, with our bodies, with our minds, right? With our emotions? And I understand that again, it goes back to the stigma. It goes back to so much. And I understand we don't want to talk about ambiguous feelings and something that's too touchy and feely, but this is where I like the hardcore neuroscience. Because if you look at the neurophysiology of the body, guess what? Every one of those soft, fluffy, warm, fuzzy feelings has a foundation that's rooted in our neurons, in the circuitry in our brain, the lobes of our brain. So we can do both. We can look at feeling states and we can look at the science. And so to me, the coolest thing is talking about meditation, but then also talking about functional MRIs, right? Because you can do both. And that's what I love about modern science is now we're kind of creating this holistic picture, and that's how we heal. It's body, mind, and soul. I mean, we're incredibly complex beings, and it's important to take care of ourselves on all fronts.
In this episode, Dan links resilience, mental health, and leadership in meaningful ways. He helps us to see how these are all interconnected and that we really stunt our own potential when we dismiss the self-awareness or we refuse to evolve. Check out Season 3, Episode 6 if you want to learn more. Our fourth leadership takeaway, foster a learning culture, goes hand in hand with self-awareness, just generally at more of the macro level. Leaders should create an environment that values and promotes lifelong learning. They can encourage ongoing education, provide resources for professional development, and recognize and reward a commitment to learning within their teams and the organization as a whole. When I identified this fourth leadership takeaway, I thought about Nick Greif, VP of Go-to-Market Strategy and Communications at InStride. Nick's company is all about learning cultures, but has flipped the traditional educational model on its head. Maybe on its side, I'm not sure. But what I am sure of is that Nick and his colleagues are doing some really important, really impactful work. Nick chatted with us about rethinking the traditional bachelor's degree approach. Why? Well, a lot of really intelligent, really motivated folks can bring a lot of good to your organization if we unpack what we assume comes along with the individual who has that degree in hand. In this clip, Nick talks to us about the link between skills-based hiring and DEI in the workplace.
Yeah, I mean, look, all the research shows that diverse workplaces create better outcomes, create more profit for companies, because diversity of experience is diversity of thought, right? And you're going to get different perspectives that are going to help you catch, pitfalls you would have otherwise not noticed. And so what we see on the, kind of the skills-based hiring front, and we're a big proponent, of doing this. We actually work with, sort of our corporate partners to help them translate what is currently bachelor's degree required to the actual relevant skills that are needed. So, an example of that is we've worked with Medtronic, a major medical device organization, with 60 of their different job families, looking at skills taxonomies, doing the external and internal research and stakeholder interviews to figure out, okay, what actually do you need to do these roles successfully? And then taking that one line that says bachelor degree required and actually breaking it out into its component skills. What that allows you to do is open up your hiring pool. You're going to have more people eligible for those roles, which when it's a tight labor market, as it has been the last few years, it's really valuable. But it's also going to mean that you can, bring in individuals that maybe otherwise wouldn't be able to join your organization because they're locked out because of that bachelor's degree requirement. And unfortunately, through the way that our country in its social fabric, or and the struggles that we've had with that, often means that underrepresented groups, low income individuals, tend to have a lower rate of bachelor degree attainment, and so you're essentially locking out your organization from a lot of its DEI goals. But the key here is that we see this sometimes where companies have DEI goals and they tend to try to accomplish them, or they don't try to, but what ends up happening is they make progress on them, but often at the entry level. And then as you go further up the organization looks less and less diverse. So it's critical here is that at InStride, we're not saying bachelor's degrees aren't valuable. They're incredibly valuable. They're as valuable as they've ever been, if not more so. All the research shows that you're going to get a much greater career progression, more take-home pay over time, if you have that degree. But should that be the barrier to get in the door, or should you be able to have relevant skills that you could have gotten all sorts of different ways to get in the door, and then internally that company invests in you, helps you get your bachelor's degree, helps you get the education you need to continue to move up that career ladder. And now what you've done is you've actually created a workforce that has diversity of thought, diversity of experience, and is going to be able to then also be a really strong, future-proofed talent pipeline that you can mature and grow internally.
In this clip, Nick also helps show us the importance and impact of a learning culture. Our fifth leadership takeaway is be curious and open-minded. Leaders have to have a sense of curiosity and a willingness to explore new ideas, perspectives, and possibilities. Being open-minded allows you to learn from many sources. You can challenge assumptions and adapt your thinking when you find new information. Dr. J.P. Paulo Fry, co-founder and president of the Institute for Health and Human Potential, made this link between being curious and being a thoughtful, effective leader crystal clear. He teaches us that curiosity and open-mindedness are two skills essential for successfully navigating tough conversations. Why? We often work to avoid these, or the alternative, we come in upset, right? He says we come in hot and we communicate in ways we didn't intend, and that often leads to a lot of damage. JP talks about this more here.
Because the brain is trying to protect the body, because of that reason we default to protection, not risk, it jumps to judgment based on less than 5% of available information, which is an alarming stat. And because of that, the brain as it processes incoming information, it prioritizes speed over accuracy. That's interesting. So in that moment, the brain is going to do everything it can to make sure that it saves the body. So it's going to prioritize speed over accuracy. It's going to jump to judgment based on less than 5%. And it's in that moment that we can sit there. Let's say I'm looking at you or I'm looking at a conversation partner and they have some look on their face. The brain, its job is to keep us safe. So it's going to sit there and actually jump to judgment with less accuracy than, speed and go, am I at risk? And is that person, what does that face mean? And that's when we can confuse the impact they are legitimately having, not legitimately, that they are having on us for their intention. So that's one of the first gaps for sure that we fall into. And And I think that point that they're not thinking about us, we're sitting there worried that they're not even thinking of us. I read this, I don't know how many years ago, in our 30s, 40s, and 50s, we worry about what other people think of us. In our 60s, we stop worrying about what people think of us. And in our 70s, we realize that we're never thinking about us in the first place. And so, it's the same idea. So that's one big part, which is the first question you asked. The second question, though, is interesting as well, which is, based on what I just said, and again, the research, we can have different frames for the same situation. And so I might see that as, let's say I'm new on a team. Let's say I don't have as much experience. Let's say internally, even I have some insecurities. So there's multi-factors, but I'm in that conversation with you, and I'm now thinking, you just gave me some feedback. Is my job at risk? Is my livelihood? And on and on and on. And you, who might have more, seniority, more experience, more confidence, more many things, more understanding of how business works or doesn't work, and how this culture is or isn't, whatever. So many factors. You might be seeing it as, no, this is just business. I'm just giving you feedback. It's nothing more than that. It's nothing personal. So it's interesting how, again, we can construe something as very personal or not personal. And because of that, it's that we can be in two different conversations. Yes. I think my job's at stake. You're like, no, I just need to get this done. By the way, I'm not even saying that it means we don't take into consideration emotion. I mean, of course, any effective leader would.
Yeah.
But that's just more data, more information. It's not necessarily, or it shouldn't be, the driving factor in what gets communicated, what accountability gets created or not, what kind of listening do you want to really tune into, so that person and you with them can help manage their brain, manage that emotion, so they can hear you. So this is why your podcast is so awesome, is there's so many levels, so many layers, and this is some of the hardest stuff we do as humans. And so it kind of behooves us to get a little bit better at it.
AP leaves us with even more pragmatic communication tips to help us have those tough conversations in his episode about transforming tough conversations. Also, his advice, expertise are part and parcel with our next leadership takeaway, developing effective communication skills. You all know this one is near and dear to my heart, because effective communication, it's crucial for leadership, for developing relationships, for lifelong learning. When we hone our listening skills, when we practice clear and concise, intentional communication, and when we are open to different communication styles to foster understanding and collaboration, we truly are unstoppable, right? Brenda Harrington, a certified executive coach and founder of Adaptive Leadership Strategies, left listeners with an important takeaway. Don't expect your title or lack of title to speak for you. In the next clip, Brenda talks to us about moving the title aside.
Move the title aside. Don't expect your title to speak for you. Okay. So we were just talking about influence, and I think of leadership competencies as being on a continuum. Authority at one end, influence at the other.
Okay. Right? Oh, I like that.
And so if I am leading by my title all the way over on that authoritative side, that we're back to that command and control. So do as I say do, and you can get things done that way, but it's a very limited source of power. Okay? But when you can move along that continuum and get closer to that place of influence, then people are with you because they believe in you, they trust you, they like you in some cases, but they respect what you're able to do. And they line up behind you and come through for you, in I won't say no matter what, but you can rely, you can have a higher degree of engagement circumstances. And so just set the titles aside.
Brenda also reminds us that we have different leadership communication strengths and we should lean into them, consider how to make them our superpowers. She talks about it more here.
Try to focus on nurturing and developing whatever that strength is, yours and yours alone. We all have it. We spend a lot of time listening to people, say, oh, you should be more of this and less of that. Going back to what you said, at the beginning, should I be a Democratic leader? Should I be a this? Should I be a that? You should be a whatever you are.
Yes. Yep.
Some people have the gift of humor, and they walk into a room, or they come onto a camera, and people start to smile in anticipation of what they're going to say. Right? They haven't said a word. So you have to find whatever that is that's your own, and really develop it and nurture it and figure out how to make it work for you. I don't want to be cliche, but how do you use that as your superpower?
And as Brenda so astutely pointed out, we need to strive to build sustainable, lasting professional relationships. Guess what, leaders? It leads us to our next key takeaway: build strong relationships and networks. Leaders should invest in building strong relationships and networks. Connecting with others allows for mentorship, knowledge sharing, and valuable insights from diverse perspectives. David Burkham is a fountain of knowledge. He's a graphic designer at Western Michigan University and one of my former graduate advisees. For his graduate capstone, David dove headfirst into a ubiquitous aspect of strong relationship and networks: ad hoc teams. As a professional creative, David often finds himself pulled into ad hoc teams. Not sure what these are? Ad hoc teams are often assembled to address and solve emergent, complex, organization-wide issues. Unlike your traditional work group, these teams are organized to be temporary, and they end up being professionally and culturally diverse. In this clip, David talks to us about knowledge sharing and documentation in ad hoc teams.
An ad hoc team solving a potentially existential problem for an organization, or even a culture problem, a procedure problem, whatever that team is doing, is as valuable in solving the problem as it is generating new knowledge for the organization. And often what that means is generating procedures, generating project management skills, generating networks and relationships, generating new forms of work practice that an organization could pay a consultant to teach them, but they learned on their own through their own people, right? Even the knowledge of how to operate a team like this is valuable to an organization, because it's highly likely that organization is going to need another emergency ad hoc team in the future, right? So the value of how a team can create useful documentation or useful ways of sharing its knowledge, and whether that could come in a number of different ways. Often I think what people generally associate with a team at the end of the day is they maybe write a report and some recommendations, and then many of the member folks I talk to, of course, lamented that, well, that went on a shelf and I never saw it again, and I have no idea what that was, But I think the research I looked into, the literature, spoke about, interesting ways that this could be done differently, right? Like a team sharing its knowledge through a live event, at the end of a project, a team creating explicitly being authors within, a content management system that an organization uses, whether that's starting a thread inside of a team, Microsoft Teams, writing, a document, having a conversation in that way, creating articles within a help desk, that kind of thing, or, being tapped to kind of take these lessons and package them into learning management, creating an ad hoc team training module or what have you, afterwards, like kind of using like more rich media as opposed to PDF to like report out what you've done. And I think the value of this sort of cross-discipline, ad hoc, emergency, all these superlatives I've added onto these sorts of teams, like, right, they teach an organization about its wider self because it's a microcosm of the organization, right? If you have people from different departments and different areas and different expertise all interacting with each other, you get to see like all those different cultures, all those different microcultures of different teams or units, like combining or crashing into each other, and documenting that or figuring out how to do that is a really useful thing for an organization. I think one of my favorite examples from the literature was journaling, just straight up like having team members journal their experiences and being able to have that like individual perspective that isn't full of like, jargon and workies and like it's not about the KPIs or all those good, acronyms we have in the world, but like people really expressing their experience and making that available to people, or having those journals be available to other team members, right, as like the process goes on. This could, because then you are seeing each other, you're seeing each other's struggles, you're seeing like how you're all affecting each other. That, of course, right, that's asking a lot of vulnerability from people, which a lot of people really commit to in a workplace, but it's a potential start, or the same authors describe the ways in which the like people would kind of do end of day write-ups to kind of their immediate team members, where that way like kind of knowledge is being shared, perspectives are being shared, and it isn't necessarily, that version of it isn't a journal, it's more a write-up thing, but it goes directly to each other, as opposed to, I think a lot of us have used project management suites where you enter something into an interface and it leaves a comment, and then who is going to read that, kind of thing. But if it's structured more as it's a direct communication between each other, like people are more likely to read that. So, but yeah, knowledge generation and knowledge sharing, like there's several ways to approach it. There's more complex ways that I've described here. There's ways of like building databases, I'm sure, as technology advances and we have more intelligent digital coworkers, I guess, in the future kind of working with us. Maybe those are the kinds of entities that can grab that knowledge and get more useful things pulled out of it. We already see how social media does these sorts of things with algorithms and stuff like that, keywords and sentiment and things like that. But yeah, like, I mean, having your people, document their work and then be able to encourage them and build into the process ways in which not just documentation, but then deliverable, and create things that benefit the organization or reward those people by making them, the folks who teach people how to do certain things, or give them a change in their position to where they're more engaged with their colleagues through spreading what they've learned through a process, like that can really benefit an organization.
As David illustrated in episode 4 of the season, part of growing professionally and personally is by building these strong relationships and strengthening networks, because it leads to more knowledge sharing and knowledge generation. This brings us to our 8th key takeaway of the season: continuously updating knowledge and skills. When we continue to learn, right, we know that this world that we're working in is rapidly changing. So this includes staying updated on trends, new technologies, and best practices. This might be through reading, going to conferences, participating in webinars, taking classes, or just listening to your favorite podcasts. Bob Gaydos is the CEO of Pendella, and this season Bob talked to us about earmarking funds every year for employee development, particularly in regard to leadership. And what else? It's really important that organizations help employees in this role, not just have this be an employee initiative. Do you want the best team? Do you want more retention? Those are the kind of questions that Bob asks and talks about more here.
Well, I've said it a few times, but I'm going to say it again. Commit the funds.
Mm-hmm.
There's just nothing more important than that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yep.
Just do it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Don't tell me that you can't find $2,000. Just don't tell me that.
Yeah.
Okay? I used to say things like this to the employer sometimes in this leadership. You just told me that you pay 70% of the health insurance, and that defaults to make it up $50 a week to the employee health plan.
Yep.
Pay 65.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They don't even know you pay 70 or 65.
Yeah.
All they know is what the payroll deduction is, and whether that payroll deduction is $50 or $55, they're still going to hate you.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
So you might as well make it 55.
Yeah.
So you have the $2,000 that you
Yeah.
can dedicate to a quality benefit that gives you a return.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Commit the funds. Just do it. I want to create a benefit that makes my wife tell the neighbor about it.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
my wife will never tell you anything positive about the health insurance or the dental or the vision.
To change and embrace innovation. Leaders need to remain open to change. And I know this can be really hard. And I know that for many of us, the knee-jerk reaction to change is to kind of cringe and get small. But by actively seeking out opportunities to embrace innovation and encouraging your team to do the same, you become much more malleable, right? You can kind of move with things rather than stopping and shattering and breaking. Being flexible and adaptable allows leaders to steer organizations through uncertainty and often capitalize on new opportunities. Many times when we hear innovation, we think of technology or new developments in streamlining or otherwise upping our efficiency. But Anis Haddad, he shares a story about how innovating and adapting to change can be embracing new practices in a way that we haven't before. Anis previously was a 2-time CEO of tech organizations and now is a leadership coach. And in this clip, he shares with us an example of being adaptable from a recent book that he wrote as well.
A man I had coached around 10 years ago, managing director of a textile factory in India. And I made it into my book, but in a fictional manner, name changed and industry and all that kind of thing. And they were struggling with safety issues. They had had a few fatalities. I was coaching him, but not on safety. I'm not a safety expert. I was coaching him on commitment and as a leader. And I asked him, so they had spent millions of dollars on global management consultants and everything to build the dashboards for safety and everything. They'd done everything you're supposed to do, but it still wasn't enough. So I asked him, how would you rate your level of commitment to safety from 1 to 10? He said, very high, probably a 9. I said, how about your top team? He said, probably an 8. And then the conversation became that maybe people were dying because it was a 9, not a 10.
Okay.
And then he got angry. He said, I can't be 10 out of 10 committed because I can't be on everyone's backs. I've got 2,000 people. They do stupid things. And then over the next few weeks, he started wondering, what is 10 out of 10 commitment to safety? And I remember the session when he had his aha moment. He was really excited to have this coaching comment. He started talking to me. He said, a few days ago, we had an event. I was walking on the shop floor. An elderly janitor slipped, twisted his ankle. I sat with him, waited, put my jacket under his head, waited for the safety people to come, check him out. He He said, all of that was 9 out of 10. That's what I would usually do. However, the idea of what would 10 out of 10 be was in my mind. So when the safety people said he's fine, he just needs to go home and rest, he said, I decided to take him home myself, get him in my car, drive him home, sit with him and his wife, made sure he committed and his wife would commit. He would not be walking on his foot for a while. And he said that was 10 out of 10 commitment. So the wellness, really looking after, really showing empathy and desire for well. And things shifted in the organization because the CEO took it to that level there.
Example that Anish shared with us really shows how we adapt to change, where we think something is impossible. Of course, I can't be 10 out of 10. We recognize that when we embrace innovation in whatever way that looks like, that we can achieve in ways we hadn't thought previously. Our last and certainly not least, actually, arguably the most important leadership takeaway: to lead by example. Leaders should model the behavior they expect from others. When you demonstrate this commitment to lifelong learning, leaders inspire teams to prioritize growth and development as well. Leading by example, we're building trust and credibility with our team, and we're encouraging a culture of continuous improvement. Dr. Ryan Beisel, professor at the University of Oklahoma, talked to us about the intersection of leadership and business ethics. Ryan has been doing some incredible work in this area for years. And here in this clip we're going to listen to in a moment, he shares recent and optimistic findings about supervisory moral talk. What does that mean? Ryan's going to tell us more, but in a nutshell, when leaders model moral talk, integrating this notion of professional excellence and the highest ideals, well, the more likely employees are going to do the same. What then? A workplace that I want to be a part of, and one that I want for you too. Here's Ryan.
Moral talk contagion, or supervisor moral talk contagion, is the research finding that when bosses are known for using explicitly ethical vocabulary, well then employees are much more likely to voice explicitly ethical concerns. So there's kind of a matching. That's why it's called contagion. We live in an era, I think, when we think about.
I don't need to define that one.
Right, that's right. But in this case, it's in a good way. Contagion in a good way. Yeah. Just as bad things can catch on, good things can too. As you said, it is an optimistic finding, and as a scholar of organizational ethics, it's really nice to find optimistic findings every once in a while. Yes. And it tells us that, hey, leaders out there, this is something we can do, and we need to use this vocabulary of ethics, morals, integrity, conscience, those kinds of things that are undeniably explicitly ethical. When we do that, it puts people's fears on note. It calms them down. It allays their anxieties and helps them when the time comes for them to also raise issues, concerns, and aspirations. To give voice to those things they are already feeling anyway. Because that's the thing. People have moral intuition. They just do. Healthy human brains do. And certainly working adults do. And so wouldn't it be great if we can capture that incredible resource and input and use it towards better deliberation and therefore better decisions.
And relatedly, when we think about our final takeaway, leading by example, Ryan leaves us with some more advice that is spot on.
I want to leave them with a challenge to begin to make the use of explicitly ethical terms in the here and now much more normal, much more normative, much more common. And that takes some intentionality as we plan for what we're about to do and as we reflect on what we did. I would recommend that we don't just talk about, was that ethical? Yes, no. We open up the whole conversation more by pointing people to ethical excellence. So you say, is this the most ethically excellent way of going about it? Is this in keeping with our highest ideals? Is this, is this what we're going to be most proud of in terms of our own integrity in dealing with others? And when we use those words, we really help people allay their fears. We help really bring forth their dialogue and get their voice involved as well. So I encourage you to invite disagreement, invite conversation. One of the things we do find too, strangely enough, is when we talk about the body. This is empirical research. Our research is showing that when we involve the body, and that sounds like what's our gut telling us on how that went last time? What's our gut saying about whether or not that was the most ethically excellent approach? That's going to help, believe it or not. When we talk about what the body knows about ethics, it's kind of a sidestep to, we don't need to be moral philosophers, guys. We actually, typical healthy human brains agree on a tremendous amount. We agree that we don't like people to steal from us, and we don't want to steal from them. We agree that we don't like people to lie to us, and we don't want to lie to them. And so I think some confidence in that, using explicitly moralized language, using gut, sort of body referencing language. What do we know to be true at our bones? What's our heart telling us on this? This is all going to be really helpful.
And there we go, folks. There are our 10 leadership takeaways from season 3. This season on the Communicative Leader has been a really special one where I am especially humbled by the incredible experts and leaders who are sharing their time and expertise with us. I want to leave you with 3 pieces of advice that were repeated often and offered frequently across this season. Some you've heard of, some that we've returned to in this finale, and others that we might not have. First one, across the board, be curious. Kind of think of yourself as a detective. When you're having big feelings, when you're not sure what to do, as JP told us, right? When we are not sure what our conversation partner is actually thinking, let's get curious. Let's ask some questions. Let's be vulnerable. Be that detective. Access as much information as you can. Number 2, read often and read widely. We have heard that advice over and over and over. As a lover of books, this makes me so happy. But when we think about it, right, this is an easy, clear way for us to expand, to continue to grow personally and professionally. Also, many of our experts, of course, they're talking about leadership books and business books, management books, time management, project management books. But there are some who also talked about fiction, right? So reading across the spectrum helps you to better understand different experiences and also learn some pragmatic lessons and takeaways. Our last one, right? It was our number 10 most important leadership takeaway, that role modeling. So of course we want to enact the behaviors we want to see. We want to be that positive change that we expect from others. And another thing that Dr. Ryan Beisel pointed out that I think is so helpful is remember the power of being the second. So too often, we might feel nervous. There might be some apprehension with speaking up and being the first to model something or express something. But if we recognize a colleague is doing this, lending our voice, raising our hand, giving our vote, whatever it is where we can publicly kind of stand with them, is another way where we can be that change we want to see. So again, listeners, friends, thank you so much for sharing your time with me. You are unbelievably appreciated, and I can't wait to connect with you more in season 4.